I remember the sound before I remember the pain. Lena, move. I screamed, grabbing my sister's arm. She froze, eyes wide, and I shoved her hard. Concrete roared above us. Someone yelled my name. Then everything crashed. When I opened my eyes, a man said, "Stay with me." Another voice said, "She can't feel her legs." I tried to sit up. "Why can't I move?" I asked. No one answered me. In the hospital room, machines beeped like they were arguing. A doctor said, "You have spinal trauma." I said, "That sounds temporary." He paused. "We'll know more soon." I stared at the ceiling and counted cracks. Evan rushed in, breathless. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere," he said, gripping my hand. "I love you. I swear." I squeezed his fingers. "You're hurting me," I whispered. He loosened his grip, but kept crying. "I'll take care of you," he said. "Whatever it takes." Lena stood near the bed, shaking. "You saved me," she said. "You didn't even think." I tried to smile. "You're my sister," I said. "That's what I'm supposed to do." She covered her face. I should have moved faster. Evan said, "Stop. This isn't your fault." I watched them talk over me. A nurse asked, "Can you feel this?" She touched my foot. I waited. "No," I said. She nodded and wrote something down. My chest felt hollow. "When will it come back?" I asked. She said, "Let's focus on today." Later, my parents called. "Be strong," my mother said. "God has a plan," my father said. I hung up and stared at my legs. They looked like they belonged to someone else. That night, Evan lay beside me. "Careful not to touch my legs. We'll get married after you heal," he said. "We'll laugh about this someday." I said, "Promise?" He said, "I promise." Lena whispered from the doorway, "I owe you my life." I closed my eyes and believed them both. The lights dimmed, and a doctor returned. "We need to run tests," he said. I asked, "Will I walk?" He didn't answer. Evan said, "She's scared." The doctor said, "That's normal." Lena said, "I'll stay." Evan said, "I should call work." I noticed he kissed her head, not mine. A nurse adjusted my blanket. "Try to rest," she said. I said, "If I sleep, will this be real?" She paused. "It already is." My throat tightened. "I don't feel brave," I said. Lena whispered, "You're always brave." I wanted to ask why bravery felt like punishment. Footsteps echoed outside. Someone laughed in the hall. I thought the world didn't stop. "Evan," I said, "don't leave tonight." He hesitated. "I'll be back early," he said. I nodded, pretending that was enough. When the room went quiet, fear finally spoke. I said, "I can't feel anything." Lena squeezed my hand. "I'll never forget this," she said. I believed her because I needed to. I didn't know survival would cost me everything I trusted. The monitor beeped again. I said, "Does that mean I'm okay?" The nurse said, "It means you're alive." Evan checked his phone. Lena watched him. I watched both. "I'm tired," I said. Evan said, "Rest." Lena said, "I love you." I whispered it back. Inside, something small cracked, quietly, like a warning I didn't understand yet. It felt like the beginning of an ending, even if I couldn't name it, even if I still believed love would save me. I lay there listening to promises, not knowing some were already breaking while I held on to them. In that bed, I trusted completely everyone that I woke up every morning staring at my feet. "Move," I whispered. Nothing happened. I tried again. "Please." The nurse said, "Don't strain yourself." I laughed softly. "I can't even strain." In rehab, Dr. Harris asked, "Can you feel this?" I shook my head. "No," he said. "And this?" I said, "Still no." He sighed. "We'll keep trying." I asked, "Why do you look sad?" He paused. "I want you prepared." I said, "Prepared for what?" He said, "For the possibility this is permanent." I stared at him. Say it clearly, he said. You might never walk again. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. He added, You're strong. I said, I don't feel strong. He said, Most people don't. Evan came that afternoon. How was rehab? He asked.
Fun, I said.
I love being lifted like luggage. He forced a smile. You're still you, I asked. Then why do you look at me like that? He said, Like what? I said, Like I'm breakable. He checked his phone. I have to go soon. Lena arrived after him, eyes red. I can't sleep, she said. Every time I close my eyes, I see you pushing me. I said, I don't regret it. She grabbed my hand. I do. I wanted to say, then stop talking about it. Instead I said, You're alive. That's enough. Days blurred together. Lift your left arm, the therapist said. I did. Good, she said. Now breathe. I said, I am breathing. She said, You're holding fear. I laughed. I'm holding everything. Evan started skipping days. When he came, he stood near the door. Work's been crazy, he said. I said, You don't have to explain. He said, I want to. I said, Then stay longer. He didn't answer. Lena came every day. I brought soup, she said. I talked to Evan, she said.
He's worried, she said.
I nodded and swallowed everything else. Don't fight because of me, she said. I said, We won't. One night, I heard crying down the hall. Someone yelled, I can't do this. Another voice said, You have to. I stared at the ceiling and whispered, Who am I now? No one answered. Dr. Harris stopped by late. How are you coping? He asked. I said, I'm being good. He said, That's not an answer. I said, I'm scared. He nodded. That's honest. Evan called instead of visiting. I miss you, he said. I said, Then come. He hesitated. Tomorrow, he said. Lena sat beside me, saying, He loves you. I said, I know. When the lights went out, my body felt heavy and empty at the same time. I'm still here, I told myself. My legs stayed silent. My heart didn't. I realized love had become something I needed to survive, even if it hurt, even if I depended on it more than I wanted to admit, because without it, I didn't know who I was anymore, lying still, listening, waiting for something inside me to answer back. Evan started leaving early. I'll come back tonight, he said, already holding his phone. It buzzed in his hand. Work? I asked. He nodded. Always work. Lena stopped meeting my eyes. When I asked, Did I say something wrong? She said, No, too fast. I told myself I was tired. I told myself pain made people strange. Maya rolled her wheelchair closer and said, He doesn't look at you anymore. I laughed. You don't know him, she said. I know silence. I said, You're dramatic. She shrugged. I'm alive. During therapy, my phone stayed quiet. Evan didn't text back. He's busy, I told the therapist. She said, You sound like you're convincing yourself. I smiled and said nothing. That evening, Evan visited for 10 minutes. I brought flowers, he said. I said, They make the room smell alive. He checked his phone. I should go. I said, Already? He said, Lena will stay. Lena sat stiffly.
He's stressed, she said.
I asked, About me? She whispered, About everything. I said, Look at me. She didn't. Maya leaned over and said, Want the truth? I said, No, she said. That's what I thought. Late that night, I heard voices in the hallway. Evan's voice said, I didn't sign up for this. Another voice said, She sacrificed everything. Evan said, I didn't ask her to. My chest tightened. I held my breath. The door opened. Evan smiled. You're awake, he said. I said, Who are you talking to? He said, A nurse. I said, You were arguing. He laughed softly. You're imagining things. I nodded. I'm tired. He kissed my forehead, quick and light. Get some rest. His phone buzzed again. He stepped outside to answer it. Lena slipped in after him. Did he say something wrong? She asked. I said, why are you asking like that? She said, I just worry. I said, so do I. She looked at the floor. Maya whispered, that smile was fake. I snapped, stop. She said, fine. The next day, Evan didn't come. He texted, sorry. Can't make it. I stared at the screen. He'll come tomorrow, I said out loud. Maya said, or he won't. Lena visited alone. He feels guilty, she said. I asked, about what? She said, about hurting you. I said, by leaving? She flinched. That night, I listened to machines hum and people cry. I whispered, love doesn't disappear. No one answered. I realized promises don't always break loudly. Sometimes they fade, quietly, while you're still waiting, still believing, still holding space for someone who has already stepped away without saying goodbye, leaving you alone with questions you're afraid to ask, because answers feel more dangerous than hope, and hope is the only thing keeping you breathing in the dark. The nurse smiled and said, your sister looks so happy. I said, what? She held up her phone. Look. I saw white fabric, flowers, Lena's face glowing. Evan stood beside her. That's not funny, I said. The nurse laughed. It's beautiful. I stared. Zoom in.
She did. Rings. Hands.
A caption with today's date. They're married, I whispered. The nurse froze. You didn't know? My chest tightened. No, she pulled the phone back. I'm sorry. I couldn't breathe. I need air. She said, you're on oxygen. I said, then why am I choking? She pressed a button. I'll get someone. I grabbed my pillow and screamed into it. No sound came out at first. Then everything came out. Maya rolled over. What happened? I said, they got married. She said, who? I said, both of them.
She didn't speak.
She just reached for my hand. Hours passed. Evan didn't come. I texted, is this real? No reply. I called. Straight to voicemail. Answer me, I whispered. I tried Lena.
Please, I said.
Nothing. A doctor came in. Your heart rate is high, he said. I said, my life just ended. He said, try to stay calm. I laughed. Did you see the photo? He said, I'm here to help you breathe. I said, then make it stop hurting. My mother called. Why are you crying? She asked. I said, they're married. Silence. Who told you? She asked. I said, a stranger. She said, we didn't know how to tell you. I said, you didn't tell me at all. That night, Lena finally texted.
I'm sorry.
I wrote back, since when? She typed, stopped, typed again. I didn't plan it. I said, you wore white. No answer. Maya said, say it out loud. I said, my sister married my boyfriend. She said, say what you feel. I said, I feel erased. She nodded. That's honest. Evan called near midnight. Please don't yell, he said. I laughed. You married her. He said, it just happened. I said, while I was paralyzed? He said, I was lonely. I said, so was I. He said, this isn't about you. That broke something. I screamed after the call ended. I saved her, I said. I lost everything. Maya whispered, I know. I said, they watched me learn to breathe again. She said nothing. I pressed my face into the pillow until my throat burned. I trusted you, I said to no one. The room stayed quiet. Machines hummed. I realized love hadn't just left me. It had chosen someone else, stood beside her, smiled for photos, and let me find out by accident. In that moment, my sacrifice meant nothing, my pain meant nothing, and the people I would have died for were already celebrating without me, while I lay there alone, finally understanding betrayal doesn't ask permission before it destroys you. Lena came 3 days later. She stood by the door and said, "Can I come in?" I said, "You're already here." She walked closer, hands shaking. "I didn't plan this," she said. "Love just happened." I stared at her. "So did the earthquake," I said. "I didn't choose that either." She cried fast and loud. "I hate myself," she said. I said, "Then why did you marry him?" She whispered, "I was scared to be alone." I laughed once. "I'm paralyzed," I said. "Do you think I'm not scared?" She covered her face. "I didn't think you'd find out like that." I said, "You didn't think of me at all." She reached for my hand. I pulled it back. "Don't," I said. She froze. "I saved you," I said quietly. "I lost my body." She sobbed. "I never asked you to." I nodded. Evan said the same thing. After she left, my phone buzzed. Evan sent a long message. "I'll always care about you, but I can't be your caregiver forever. This isn't the life I imagined. I hope you understand." I read it twice. Then again. "Caregiver," I whispered. Maya said, "He's choosing comfort." I said, "He already did." Aunt Clara arrived that evening. She read the message and slapped the table.
Coward, she said.
"Both of them." I said, "Please don't yell." She looked at me. "Why are you protecting them?" I said, "I don't know how to stop." She pulled a chair close. "You don't owe anyone forgiveness," she said. I said, "Everyone keeps telling me to be strong." She said, "Strength isn't silence." I looked at my hands. Silence feels safer. Lena texted later. "I hope one day you can forgive me." I typed, "I hope one day you understand what you took." I didn't send it. I put the phone down. That night, Maya said, "You're too calm." I said, "I'm tired." She said, "This is shock." I said, "No. This is clarity." She watched me carefully. "What are you going to do?" I said, "Survive." The next morning, Dr. Harris asked, "How's your mood?" I said, "Stable." He said, "That's vague." I said, "I stopped crying." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes that's grief changing shape." I said, "Sometimes it's just ending." Evan didn't call again. Lena stopped visiting. The room felt quieter, without apologies. I noticed something strange. The pain didn't disappear, but it stopped controlling me. I wasn't waiting anymore. Aunt Clara squeezed my shoulder before leaving. "Endurance is power," she said. I repeated it after she left. "Endurance is power." I lay there, staring at the ceiling, not asking why anymore. I didn't forgive them. I didn't hate them either. I simply closed something inside me. Love hadn't saved me. Sacrifice hadn't saved me. So, I chose something else. I chose to last. I chose to keep breathing, keep learning, keep going, even if it meant becoming someone colder, quieter, and harder than before, because survival didn't mean moving on like they did. It meant staying alive without them. Rehab stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like routine. Again, the therapist said. I said, "I am doing it." She said, "You're surviving it." I nodded. "That counts." Dr. Harris asked, "What does strength mean to you now?" I said, "Not apologizing for pain." He smiled. "That's progress." One afternoon, Noah rolled in and said, "You still hate hospitals?" I laughed. "More than ever." He looked at my chair. "You still you?" I said, "Mostly." He said, "Good. I missed you." He didn't look away. That mattered. We talked like nothing had changed. "Remember when you said you'd write a book?" he asked. I said, "I was dramatic." He said, "You still are." I smiled. Maybe I should start. That night, I opened a blank document. "What are you doing?" Maya asked. I said, "Taking space." She said, "From who?" I said, "Everyone." I typed anyway. Noah came back often. "Want coffee?" he asked. I said, "Hospital coffee is illegal." He said, "I'll smuggle real one." He always did. He never asked about Evan. Lena posted photos online. White dresses. Smiles. Beach sunsets. Evan's arm around her. Maya said, "You going to scream?" I said, "No," she said. "You're scary calm." I said, "I'm busy." "Busy with what?" she asked. I said, "My life." She nodded. "That's new." Noah read my pages one day. "This is angry," he said. I said, "I know." He said, "It's all so clear." I said, "I don't want revenge." He said, "Good." I said, "I want control." He met my eyes. "That's different." During therapy, the therapist said, "You don't flinch anymore." I said, "Pain and I understand each other now." She said, "That's acceptance." I said, "That's discipline." Evan never contacted me. Lena never explained more. The silence felt different now. It didn't hurt. It confirmed. One night, Noah asked, "Do you miss them?" I thought. "I miss who I was," I said. He said, "You're still her." I shook my head.
No.
"I'm stronger." Maya said, "You changed." I said, "I adapted." She grinned. "That's how survivors talk." I planned quietly. I wrote quietly. I watched quietly. Rage burned out and left focus behind. I stopped reacting. I started choosing. When I closed my laptop, I felt steady. "I'm okay," I said out loud. Noah smiled. "I know." Maya rolled closer. "You're dangerous now." I said, "Only to people who underestimate me." I went to sleep without checking my phone. I didn't imagine apologies. I didn't picture revenge scenes. I pictured distance.
Time.
Balance. I understood something then. Power didn't arrive with noise. It arrived when I stopped waiting for them to notice me. I wasn't healing to prove anything. I was rebuilding because I could. And for the first time since the earthquake, I felt like my life was moving forward again, even if my body stayed still, because patience gave me something anger never could. Control. Daniel called in the afternoon. "Is this a good time?" he asked. I said, "I'm listening." He cleared his throat. "I'm the lawyer handling compensation from the earthquake." I said, "I wasn't told there was compensation." He said, "That's why I'm calling." He explained slowly. There was insurance tied to the building. Medical compensation. Long-term care. I said, "And?"
He paused.
"Your name is on everything." I blinked. "Why?" He said, "You were the one injured." I said, "Evan handled the paperwork." Daniel said he signed, but he didn't finalize. I laughed once. Of course he didn't. Daniel said, he assumed the funds would go to shared expenses. I said, "Assumed." Daniel said, "The final approval requires your signature." I said, "So nothing has been released?" He said, "Not a dollar." My hand shook slightly. "What about Lena?" I asked. Daniel said, "She's not listed." I said, "She never reads fine print." He said, "Neither did Evan." Noah was sitting nearby. "You okay?" he asked. I covered the phone. "They forgot something important." Daniel continued, "There's also a separate settlement tied to negligence." I said, "How much?" He gave a number. I went quiet. "Are you still there?" Daniel asked. I said, "Yes." He said, "I need to meet you." I said, "I don't rush decisions." He said, "That's wise." I said, "Send me everything." After the call, Noah said, "That sounded serious." I said, "It's power." He raised his eyebrows. "Do they know?" I said, "Not yet." Maya rolled closer. "Why are you smiling like that?" I said, "I'm not smiling."
She studied me.
"You're calm." I said, "I finally understand something." She said, "What?" I said, "Patience is louder than anger." Daniel visited 2 days later. "You're entitled to all of it," he said. I asked, "If I sign?" He nodded. Evan believed marriage meant shared assets. He added carefully. I said, "Belief isn't law." Daniel didn't argue. Lena called that night. Why did a lawyer leave you a message? She asked. I said, you saw that? She said, Evan did. I said, interesting. She said, is something wrong? I said, no. Something is clear. Evan texted, we should talk. I replied, I'm busy. Noah watched me type. You okay? He asked. I said, better than okay. Daniel said, you don't owe them anything. I said, I know. He said, what do you want to do? I looked at the papers. I want time. He nodded. Take all you need. That night, I lay awake. I didn't feel excited. I felt steady. They had moved on quickly, carelessly, assuming I was powerless. They forgot I was still here. They forgot my name was the last one required. Maya whispered, you're thinking too hard. I said, I'm choosing carefully. She smiled. That's dangerous. I said, only for people who underestimated me. I didn't call them. I didn't warn them. I didn't feel guilty. For the first time since the earthquake, something shifted. I wasn't waiting for karma. I was holding it. And I learned something important in that silence. Power doesn't announce itself. It waits, quietly, until the right moment, while everyone else believes the story is already over, never realizing the ending still belongs to me. The alert buzzed on my phone. Possible seismic activity. The nurse read aloud. People panicked. Someone shouted, not again. I stayed quiet. I'd already felt the ground give up once. Maya asked, you okay? I said, I know how this ends. She frowned. That's not comforting. I said, it's honest. Noah called. Did you see the warning? He asked. I said, yes. He said, are you scared? I thought for a moment. No, I said. I'm prepared. He didn't reply right away. An hour later, my phone rang again. Lena's name flashed. I hadn't seen it in months. I answered. Hello. She sounded breathless. Did you get the alert? I said, I did. She said, Evan's freaking out. I stayed silent. She rushed on. Our building is old. What if something happens? I said, that's possible. She lowered her voice. What should we do? I looked at my hands. You should listen to officials. She said, can you help us? I didn't answer. The line stayed open. Please, she whispered. I don't know what to do. I said, you'll figure it out. She said, you're being cold. I said, I'm being honest. She hung up. Maya watched me. That was your sister, she said. I nodded. She wanted saving again. Maya said, and you? I said, I'm done pushing people out of danger. That evening, the building shook slightly. Cups rattled. Someone screamed. A nurse said, stay calm. I breathed slowly. I know this feeling, I whispered. Noah texted, are you safe? I replied, yes. He asked them? I didn't answer. The shaking grew stronger later that night. Alarms rang. Hold on, someone yelled. I held the armrests of my chair and counted. 1,
2, 3. It passed.
Minutes later, my phone lit up. Evan called. The walls cracked, he said. Lena's crying. I said, is anyone hurt? He said, not yet. I said, that's good. He lowered his voice. Can you talk to her? I said, why? He said, she listens to you. I laughed softly. She didn't listen before. He snapped. This isn't the time. I said, it's exactly the time. Lena grabbed the phone. I'm scared, she said. I said, I know. She said, I keep thinking about that day. I said, so do I. She said, what if I lose everything? I closed my eyes. Then you survive. The call ended abruptly. Maya said, you didn't comfort them. I said, I didn't lie. She nodded slowly. You've changed. I said, I adapted. Later, news alerts showed damaged buildings. One was theirs. No collapse. Just cracks. Just fear. I stared at the screen and felt nothing sharp, only clarity. I realized something as the night quieted. Fear had returned to their voices the same way it once lived in mine. This time, I wasn't underneath it. I wasn't crushed. I was watching from solid ground, understanding that some disasters don't destroy you twice. They just show you who learned the lesson and who didn't, while the earth keeps reminding everyone that stability is never guaranteed. Daniel placed the papers in front of me. "This is the final signature," he said. I picked up the pen. "Once I sign?" I asked. He nodded. "The funds are released to you alone." I said, "Good." I signed without shaking. Noah exhaled. "That's it," he asked. I said, "That's it." Daniel gathered the papers. "You're protected now," he said. I replied, "I was never protected before." Evan showed up an hour later. "Please," he said, standing too close. "Just hear me out." I said, "You already talked enough." He swallowed. I was overwhelmed. I said, "So was I." He said, "I made mistakes." I said, "You made choices." Lena followed him inside. Her eyes were red. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. I looked at her. "You married him." She whispered, "I've always lived in your shadow." I said, "I never put you there." She cried harder. "You were always stronger." I said, "I paid for that strength." Evan reached for my chair. "We can fix this," he said. I said, "There is no we." He said, "You don't have to do this." I said, "I already did." Lena dropped to her knees. "Please," she said. "I'm scared." I said, "So was I under that building." Evan snapped, "That's not fair." I met his eyes. "Neither was leaving me when I couldn't walk." He whispered, "I said I was sorry." I said, "Apologies don't undo abandonment." Lena said, "You're punishing us." I shook my head. "I'm choosing myself." Daniel cleared his throat. "Legally, this conversation is over." Evan turned to him. "She's being cruel." Daniel said, "She's being clear." Lena grabbed my hand. "You'd really let us lose everything?" I pulled back. "I already lost everything once." She sobbed. "I thought you'd save me again." I said, "I won't." Silence filled the room. Evan looked small. "What do you want?" he asked. I answered honestly, "Peace." He laughed bitterly. "You got revenge." I said, "No. I got control." They left without another word. Noah stayed. "How do you feel?" he asked. I thought. "Light," I said. "That makes sense," he replied. Later, Maya called. "Did you do it?" she asked. I said, "Yes." She smiled through the phone. "Proud of you." I said, "I didn't enjoy it." She said, "You weren't supposed to." That night, I looked at my hands and felt steady. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't begged. I hadn't saved anyone. I understood something important then. Love without respect is just another disaster waiting to happen. I had already survived one collapse. I didn't owe anyone another rescue. When I chose myself, the ground didn't shake. The world didn't end. It finally stood still, and for the first time, I was standing too, exactly where I belonged and I turned on the news. "Another building lawsuit," the anchor said. I sipped my tea. Noah asked, "Do you care?" I said, "Not really." He frowned. "Why?" I said, "I'm watching consequences, not gloating." Another report appeared. Evan Whitman loses his position. I said, "Figures." Maya rolled her eyes. "You're smiling." I said, "I'm steady." She said, "That's scarier." Lena's scandal flashed across the screen. "Image ruined," the reporter said. I said nothing. Noah said, "Doesn't it feel good?" I shook my head. "I'm not here for satisfaction. I'm here for closure." A lawyer called about a minor delay in the settlement. I said, "Fine. Handle it." He said, "They're trying to negotiate?" I said, "I don't negotiate." Daniel chuckled over the phone. As expected. I said, I'm predictable now. Evan tried texting. I made a mistake. I didn't answer. Lena sent an emoji, pretending she was fine. I deleted it. Pretending doesn't repair, I muttered. Noah said, or hurt anymore. I nodded. Exactly. I started physical therapy again. Push against the resistance, the therapist said. I grunted. I will. She said, you're stronger. I said, I'm awake. Not healed. Not whole. But awake. That counted. Travel plans appeared. I booked flights. Where? Maya asked. I said, anywhere I haven't been. She grinned. Freedom suits you. I said, it suits me. I packed lightly.
I didn't need weight from the past.
Emails from Evan stopped. Lena didn't call. I realized absence is its own kind of message. Noah said, it's quiet karma. I said, I like quiet. He said, I hope it teaches them. I said, they're learning. I walked into the park, cane in hand. Children ran by. Birds circled. A man apologized for bumping into me. I said, it's okay. No one owed me anything. The world hadn't changed for me, but I had changed within it. News flashes followed me, lawsuits, debts, shame, but I didn't follow them. I focused on breathing, on stretching, on living. The weight of revenge lifted. Power didn't roar. It whispered. Noah said, you're smiling differently. I said, I'm not smiling. He said, content. I said, present. The wind brushed my face. This is enough. I called my therapist. How am I doing? I asked. She said, better than before. I said, steady. She said, not everyone survives quietly. I said, I am. That night, I didn't check my phone. I didn't replay memories. I only planned tomorrow. I realized something crucial. Karma doesn't announce itself. It moves softly, unseen, while the guilty stumble. I don't need applause or headlines. I only need myself. And for the first time in a long time, that's all I wanted, and it was enough. The door creaked and Lena stepped in. No makeup. Hair messy. She didn't smile. I said, hello. She swallowed. Hi. She sat across from me, hands folded. I wanted to come alone, she said. I nodded. Okay. She paused. I've been thinking a lot. I said, about? She looked down. Everything. How I treated you. How I married him. How I never understood your pain. I said nothing. I wish I had been braver, she whispered. Braver to tell the truth. Braver to stand by you. I nodded again. Go on. I wish I had been kinder, she said. Tears slipped down her face. To you. To myself. To the world you saved me from. I said, bravery and kindness are lessons. Learned too late, maybe. I wish I had been better, she said. Better sister. Better person. Better human. I watched her struggle with each word. Better is something you become, not something you owe, I said softly. She looked up, eyes wet. Do you hate me? I shook my head. I don't. She blinked. Do you forgive me? I paused. Yes, I said. Not for you. For me. She flinched. What does that mean? I said. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It doesn't fix what broke. It just lets me stop carrying it. She whispered. So, we're okay? I said, we're not okay and we don't need to be. I forgive you, but I don't need you back. She nodded slowly. Relief and regret mixed on her face. I feared I'd never see you again, she said. And now? I said, now I'm glad you came. Closure isn't loud. It's quiet. It's enough. She shifted in her chair. I'm so sorry, I said. I know. She said nothing else. She didn't try to hug me. She didn't argue. She didn't explain further. I didn't expect her to. After a long silence, she stood. Thank you for listening, she said. I said, thank you for speaking. She hesitated, then left without looking back. I closed my eyes. The room was still. I didn't feel emptiness. I didn't feel revenge. I felt release. Forgiveness had nothing to do with them. It was a gift to myself, a chain broken silently. I whispered to the empty room, I'm free. My legs didn't move, but my heart did. I had survived the earthquake, the betrayal, and the silence. Now I survived forgiveness, on my own terms. For the first time, I wasn't waiting. I wasn't hurting. I wasn't trapped in their choices. I was here, fully alive in my own space, finally standing inside myself, unshaken, unbroken, and quietly, completely free. The morning light touched my room, soft and steady. I stretched my arms, careful with my wheelchair. Good morning, world, I whispered. No one answered, and I liked it that way. Noah called. Coffee, he asked. I said, on my balcony.
He laughed.
You've upgraded from hospital coffee? I said, I survive upgrades. I watched the street wake up. Children ran, dogs barked, cars honked. I breathed in deeply. I'm alive, I said. Noah said, and well? I smiled. I'm better than well. At the table, I wrote a little, my journal open. Plans? Noah asked. I said, travel, writing, life. He raised an eyebrow. Ambitious. I said, steady ambition. The phone buzzed. Messages from Lena. None from Evan.
I didn't open them.
Noah said, closure complete? I said, complete enough. He nodded. You're calm. I said, not calm. Centered. I glanced at my legs, still silent. You've done well, I told him. Noah said, your chair moves fast today. I said, faster than gossip.
He laughed. Good.
Later, I practiced exercises. 1, 2, 3. I counted aloud. My body remembered discipline, endurance, strength. You're stronger, the therapist said over video call. I said, I learned patience first. She smiled. That's rare. I said, necessary. A breeze brushed my face. I whispered, I survived everything. Noah asked, everything? I said, collapse, betrayal, abandonment, silence, fear. He said, you sound like a hero. I laughed softly. I feel like a survivor. News flashed about minor tremors somewhere distant. I checked anyway. Another earthquake? Noah said. I said, maybe. He said, you'll be scared. I shook my head. Not this time. He blinked. You're serious. I said, I've been through worse. I won't panic. I remembered the hospital, the pillow, the screaming, the betrayal, the wedding photo, the silence, the legal papers, the slow reclamation of myself. I said aloud, I am enough. Noah said, finally? I said, always. I just needed to find it again. Evening came. I rolled to the balcony. Stars flickered. I built this, I whispered. Noah said, your life? I said, my life. Stronger than what I lost. Fuller than what I feared. He nodded. Quiet triumph suits you. I said, I'll keep it quiet. Let it grow. No sound of panic. No fear of collapse. Only steady breath. I thought, if the earth shakes again, I will be ready. I wasn't waiting for anyone. I wasn't hoping for apologies. I wasn't counting losses. I only counted the moments I owned, the air I breathed, the strength I carried. The doorbell rang. I didn't jump. I didn't flinch. Noah said, who is it? I said, irrelevant. He laughed. That's a new tone. I said, it's mine. I rolled back inside. I smiled at my reflection. I survived, I said again. Not by luck. Not by chance. By enduring, by claiming, by deciding I would stand in my own life, no matter the tremors. And if the next earthquake came, I would meet it exactly where I stood, steady, unshaken, and wholly mine. My past had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I was whole. I was free. And I was ready.